nothing but pity in my heart for the chief witness for the state. She is the victim of cruel poverty and ignorance. But my pity does not extend so far as to her putting a man's life at stake, which she has done in an effort to get rid of her own guilt. Now, I say guilt, gentlemen, because it was guilt that motivated her. She's committed no crime. She has merely broken a rigid and time-honored code of our society. A code so severe that whoever breaks it is hounded from our midst, is unfit to live with. She must destroy the evidence of her offense. But what was the evidence of her offense? Tom Robinson, a human being. She must put Tom Robinson away from her. Tom Robinson was to her a daily reminder of what she did. Now, what did she do? She tempted a Negro. She was white, and she tempted a Negro. She did something that in our society is unspeakable. She kissed a black man. Not an old uncle, but a strong, young Negro man. No code mattered to her before she broke it, but it came crashing down on her afterwards.
Good evening, one and all. Welcome to the movie program on Public Radio KCBX. San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara counties on this Martin Luther King holiday. Across the aisle from me in the plush KCBX projection room, the one and only, back from New York, Bob Whiteford.
Well, it's a pleasure to be back, and it's always a pleasure to be sitting across from the unquestioned and unchallenged czar of cinema on the Central Coast, the incomparable gentleman Jim Dee. Good to see you again, Jimmy.
Great to see you, Bob. And Catherine McDonald, the third of the Take Two trio, out on assignment, maybe watching a movie tonight, but had fantastic shows with Catherine while you were gone, and she'll be back here behind the microphone in the weeks to come.
And I want to say thanks to Catherine for filling in for me again. But I got to say, I'm back, and I don't think I'm going anywhere for a while. So, you know, it's good to be back and talking movies again. And boy, I'm pleased as punch to be back.
Great to have you back, Bob. And had some great shows, great callers all while you were gone. You were gone for about 3-4 weeks or so. But the great listeners are out there, and I'm sure they're out there tonight as tonight's discussion on this Martin Luther King holiday, and essentially a current news item with the talk of affirmative action in the daily news. We're going to be talking about race and racism in film. And as Bob and I were thinking about it, again, you start digging into the treasure trove of these great films. I mean, I went all the way back to D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation,
Wow.
which I don't know the date of that film, but
Maybe 1916?
One of the controversies of that is the depiction of the Ku Klux Klan
as heroes, no less.
Yeah, boy.
My goodness.
And, you know, as you consider the issues of the day, whether you're thinking about Martin Luther King or you are thinking about affirmative action, some of these current topics, you can read the newspaper all you want, and you can perhaps, I pulled up some Martin Luther King websites and was reading some of his quotes, but one way to, I think, get in touch with your feelings about race and racism is to watch a good movie. And there's a lot of great ones out there that are very appropriate for watching during this time.
Absolutely, Jimmy. Boy, what a rich field. And I tend to think cinematically, and hey, if people think this is think differently, please chime in on it. I tend to think that race in film really started to come to a fore after World War II, in terms of, being dealt with in films. We were talking earlier, probably two early examples that I can think of came from the year 1949, and one was the Stanley Kramer produced, Mark Robson directed film called Home of the Brave, which had Lloyd Bridges, Frank Lovejoy, Steve Brody, Jeff Corey, and an African-American actor from that time named James Edwards, who has shown up in many films since. He had a bit part in The Manchurian Candidate. He was in Patton. He played George Patton's valet. I think his name was George as well. And here's a man that probably had his career, had he come around 10 years later, he would have been more of a leading man. But at this time, dealing with this particular film, which was a war movie, and it's interesting because the war movie, especially like a World War II or a Korean War film, Pork Chop Hill also had racial elements to it as well, and Edwards was in that too. It allowed for people to be candid about race and have to deal with racial issues. And this film was interesting because, as far as I can tell, it was the first, and it had to deal with 5 GIs on a Japanese-held island. They're mapping it out for an invasion. 4 are white, 1's black, and they're left alone most of the time to kind of deal. It's almost like the Japanese are not an issue. They're really dealing with their own feelings about this one black GI. And it's a wonderful picture. And again, it's a first step. Same year, Intruder in the Dust, which was released by Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. I believe it's based on a Faulkner story, or he wrote the screenplay. I mean, he was doing stuff like that then, and I might be mistaken. I'm sure if I am, someone will let me know. But it starred David Bryan, Claude Jarman Jr. You might remember him from Rio Grande. He played John Wayne's son. That was a year later. And Juano Hernandez, and it has to do with an old black gentleman being unjustly charged with murder in a white southern town, and how this young white boy gets this attorney, played by David Bryan, who's white, to defend this elderly black man against an unjust charge of murder, and they help clear him. And these are, as far as I can tell, the first films that dealt with race. Elia Kazan's Pinky, which was also about, I believe, some woman who was African American but passed for white, and it's not Imitation of Life. That actually is from 1933. So those are some early examples.
Where the race issue was actually, how shall we say, not in the forefront, but at least a subject within the film, to where it wasn't just an overtone or something, to where it was an issue that you could pinpoint in the film. So those titles again: Home of the Brave,
Intruder in the Dust,
and
Pinky.
Boy. The opening of our program is a film that we've referred to for many different reasons on this program, To Kill a Mockingbird. We've talked about it from the great soundtrack with Elmer Bernstein. We've talked about it as a great film for kids, and I think it's, especially along those lines, you can watch To Kill a Mockingbird with your kids, and you can talk about the issues that it brings up. It's thoroughly entertaining. It's moving. It's just one of those, in my mind, a perfect film. And,
I agree.
In looking at bits of the film today, you wonder where racism actually comes from. And I think the film is perfect from beginning to end pretty much. But there's a scene where Atticus, who is played by Gregory Peck, has taken on the job of defending Tom Robinson, who...
portrayed by Brock Peters.
And what's happening are the repercussions of Atticus taking on the case. His children are being affected, and his daughter Scout got into a fight at school because they were calling her father names. And I think what's a really amazing scene in this film, we're going to hear a little clip from it. So here's Atticus, the father, sitting down with his daughter Scout, and they're talking specifically about the issue. Let's play that, Gary.
Oh, what is it, Scout?
Atticus, do you defend niggers?
Don't say nigger, Scout.
I didn't say it. Cecil Jacobs did. That's why I had to fight him.
Scout, I don't want you fighting.
I had to, Atticus.
I don't care what the reasons are. I forbid you to fight.
Yes.
Anyway, I'm simply defending a Negro, Tom Robinson. Scout, there are some things that you're not old enough to understand just yet. There's been some high talk around town to the effect that I shouldn't do much about defending this man.
If you shouldn't be defending him, then why are you doing it?
For a number of reasons. The main one is that if I didn't, I couldn't hold my head up in town. I couldn't even tell you or Jim not to do something again. Scout. You're going to hear some ugly talk about this in school. But I want you to promise me one thing, that you won't get into fights over it, no matter what they say to you.
A father-daughter discussion about race in a film. And I would say that any of the films that Bob and I talk about on tonight's program, if you want to get in the mindset of what's happening today in the holiday or the current discussion in the news about affirmative action or race in this country, check out one of these films and have a cup of coffee afterwards and discuss it amongst yourselves or with your kids.
You know what's interesting about this film, Jim? I was just thinking about it right now. It came out in 1962, and this is right when the civil rights movement was really starting to gain a lot of momentum. And I believe even though, you know, it's coming out of Gregory Peck's mouth, it seems kind of like a Dr. King-influenced statement. And I don't know whether Harper Lee was familiar with Dr. King when she wrote the book. I don't know, for example, how long ago, what the time was when the book was written to when it was made into a film. I'd be kind of curious about that. But it certainly feels like it has the influence of the early 60s civil rights movement.
Boy, great point. That's a great point. And, you know, as I'm sitting here thinking about other films during that time period, there's probably, again, when we open up the phone lines later on in the program, I'm sure our listeners can come up with some other great ones during the time period. This one, a particularly great one. But the more I thought about the topic today, the more titles kept coming forward. And now, you mentioned the actor who was in Manchurian Candidate once again.
James Edwards.
James Edwards, who could have been, as you mentioned, almost a Sidney Poitier before his time. Very strong, black, just a great actor on screen. And then, of course, in the 60s, and I'm not sure when the first Sidney Poitier films started coming out, but talk about an amazing screen persona, and just by his presence in the movies, brought the issue of race to the fore in motion pictures.
Poitier seemed to change everything.
Yes.
From his first film, Cry the Beloved Country, I think from 1951, a British film, And he also did a film in 1951, a war movie called Red Ball Express with Jeff Chandler and Alex Nichol. And again, it's that using the war movie as kind of the excuse or the opening to deal with race issues. And even though that was kind of a glossy film, not as gritty as, say, Home of the Brave, but Sidney Poitier definitely was a powerful presence and an actor to be reckoned with. I mean, you think about his performance in, the one where he's chained to Tony Curtis.
Oh, the Defiant ones.
Yeah, and I think that was Stanley Kramer as well.
Yes, it was.
Again, revisiting the race issue. And what a powerful film that was. And his friend and outspoken advocate for equal rights for African Americans was Harry Belafonte.
Yes.
And he did a couple of films in 1959, Odds Against Tomorrow, where Robert Ryan, who in real life was not far from a racist, but boy, they had a real confrontation in that was pretty nasty. And Belafonte, a great film presence. He also did The World, the Flesh, and the Devil. I think that was from the early 60s with Inger Stevens, a film that's often talked about, but nobody seems to see anymore.
The one with Robert Ryan, Bob, was called
Odds Against Tomorrow.
Wow.
And how about Sidney Poitier when he plays a prison psychologist or psychiatrist trying to cure Bobby Darin of his racist tendencies, a film called Pressure Point.
Boy.
That doesn't get talked about too much anymore. And
is that available on video?
Yes, it is.
Wow. Pressure Point.
Pressure Point. And it takes place in a prison. Bobby Darin, who, I know he was a great entertainer and a really terrific actor. And again, it's from 1963. The film was heavily influenced by the civil rights movement at that time. And Poitier just shines as a prison psychiatrist, determined to help this prisoner, this man who needs his help, who hates him. And their interaction is fascinating. It's a marvelous small gem, and just another reason why Sidney Poitier is wonderful.
I guess, Sidney's influence still, you could feel it today, but in the 60s seemed to be his golden era, like the films we're talking about. To Sir with Love, there were the racial overtones there, and the fact here is a black instructor, and, it's sort of not taken advantage of, but, again, the typical situations that would arise in this British classroom and a black teacher showing up and the results.
And what's fascinating about that film, Jim, aside from the fact that, here's this, African or black teacher. I don't even know what the heck to call people anymore. Gregory Peck's calling them Negroes. I don't know. To me, everybody's just human beings.
There you go.
Now that that's out of the way,
Spencer Tracy will deal with that in upcoming. Okay.
And he's far more eloquent than I am, thank goodness. But what's interesting about that film, and we're talking about To Sir with Love, is it's kind of a linkage to a film Poitier did in 1955 called Blackboard Jungle.
Oh, yes.
Where Glenn Ford was the teacher, and Poitier and this racially mixed, mostly poor kid class, he's kind of the leader.
Yes, yeah.
And the class was kind of interesting because one of them was played by Vic Morrow, another one was played by Paul Mazursky, the director. Another one was Jamie Farr.
And they're probably on their teens maybe in that film.
Oh, boy, yeah. And in those days, Jamie Farr was known as Jamal Farrar, his Lebanese name, but I digress. But what a marvelous film. I mean, great music by Lulu.
Yeah, and maybe a great double bill. I mean, if you really want to get into it, rent Blackboard Jungle from 1955, and then the inversion of it is To Sir with Love, which is about 12 years later.
Well, I think it is interesting because, in 55, Poitier could be the leader of the students. in 67, he's the teacher. He's in charge. So we're seeing a change.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's move on to, a great film. I was going to say it's the pièce de résistance or something, but no, this is right up there with a lot of the other films, and it's The Amazing in the Heat of the Night with Sidney Poitier and Rod Steiger. Just electric on screen, and we've got a clip from it. And this is a great clip from In the Heat of the Night. A murder has taken place, and Deputy Warren Oates picks up, of course, the most likely person who would do it, Sidney Poitier, who is waiting at a train station. He's whisked away to the police department. Of course, it's, guilty before proven innocent. And he is grilled, Sidney Poitier is grilled by Rod Steiger.
Got a name, boy?
Virgil Tibbs.
Virgil. Well, I don't think we're going to have any trouble, are we, Virgil?
No trouble at all.
All right. Virgil. Oh. Now, look. I try to run a nice, clean, safe town here. A town where a man can sneeze and not get his brains beat out. You follow me?
Yes.
Why don't you tell me how you killed Mr. Colbert, and I promise you you're going to feel a whole lot better. Not now.
I was visiting my mother. I came in on the 12:35 from Brownsville. I was waiting to go out on the 4:05.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In the meanwhile, you just killed yourself a white man, just about the most important white man we got around here, and picked yourself up a couple $100.
I earned that money 10 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Colored can't earn that kind of money, boy. Hell, that's more than I make in a month. Now, where did you earn it?
Philadelphia.
Mississippi?
Pennsylvania.
Just what you do up there in little old Pennsylvania, earn that kind of money?
I'm a police officer.
Oh, amazing stuff.
Well, shut Rod Steiger's mouth, and that's not an easy thing to do.
And, Bob, I think one of the amazing things in this film is, I think maybe it's just a personal impression that sometimes if you have a debate about issues, I think somewhere back, at least in my mind, is I'm not going to change another person's mind with my opinions. I mean, they have their opinion, I have my opinion. What I think is great in the Heat of the Night is that Rod Steiger, as much of a racist that he is, changes in the film. He gets to know Virgil. He's the homicide expert, and therefore, after that scene, after he's pretty much shipping him out and saying, "Get out of here," he turns to Virgil and says, "Well, will you look at the body that we have here?" He says, "After all, you're an expert." So what the film, I think, aside from being a great murder mystery, a great film about race issues, is that idea that people can change, that people can hopefully see things that are out of their mindset and change for the better.
There's a fascinating little bit to that film, and I noticed it today for the first time.
Oh, yeah.
And I was actually watching the film and talking about the film with a friend of mine named Bob, who was writing something about it. And there was a scene in the greenhouse where Rod Steiger and Sidney Poitier are interviewing a suspect, and he's an elderly white gentleman who takes offense. His genteel southern manners drop very quickly when he realizes that he's a suspect, and he slaps Sidney Poitier in the face. And Poitier very quickly slaps him back.
Wow.
And then Steiger is stuck. What does he do? because he's starting to kind of respect this man through the force of his personality and his actions and his integrity, and how he doesn't do anything. In fact, the commentary from the director, Norman Jewison, who did A Soldier's Story from 1984, which is a great, great African-American film starring the late, great Adolph Caesar.
Denzel's in that.
Denzel Washington. He has a very big role in it. Harold E. Rollins, who sadly is also gone. A great film. But I digress. And he talks about what they ad-libbed this scene and the idea of like the white man slapping the black man and then the black man slapping back. So, I mean, immediately, not taking this at all, had never been done in film. I mean, you know, this is we're going back about 36 years here, folks, and this action at the time was pretty controversial. It hadn't happened before.
Mm-hmm. And what I might add is after that scene, after Sidney slaps the white man, it's not said, but there's this rather a mood that the white man turns to Rod Steiger and says, "You saw what he did." In other words, you know, like at that point, the ultimate taboo. I mean, if Rod Steiger pulled out his gun and shot him, I mean, that would have been fine in the context of this scene. And it's like going back to Kill a Mockingbird, where the woman on trial or in the trial, you know, one of the other great taboos is she fell in love with a black man and she's white and she kissed him, and it's like it's on the level of Sidney Poitier slapping the white man. It's like the ultimate taboo, to the point where it's open game for Sidney Poitier. I mean, he slapped a white man. We can do anything we want.
And you know what's fascinating, because of the taboo breaking, is the same year he broke the ultimate taboo. He came home with a middle-class white young woman to be married.
Oh.
And then we're getting to our next film, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner?
And
also directed by Stanley Kramer.
Boy, I didn't know this was going to be a Stanley Kramer program, but it is in a way, because I mean his films are still because of the way the mood of the nation right now, the holiday that we're celebrating. His films are still poignant, and you pull them out and they're fresh. And well, when you talk about Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, I was watching some of that today, Bob, and you know, today I yearn for those films with conversation, with intelligent banter. And just watching Guess Who's Coming to Dinner today, the issue of race is talked and talked and talked and talked out. It's talked out by Sidney Poitier's parents in the film. It's talked out by Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn. What are the ramifications of these two people getting married? And it's refreshing just to hear, instead of like a 30-second or 1 minute snippet and, you're quickly moving on to something else. These people talk and they express their feelings and their emotions, and it's just really refreshing.
And you know what's fascinating about this film, amongst the fact that it's a wonderful film and it stands the test of time extremely well, and that it's Spencer Tracy's last hurrah in films, and his speech at the end is epic. But these are films that are contemporary with Dr. King's experience.
Yes.
This is what was happening cinematically while he was making history in the public arena. That's why I think these films are important. I mean, people might look at them now and say, well, I don't get it. They're talking about Stanley Kramer and Sidney Poitier, but it's like, these were King's contemporaries, and this is how you could measure King's effect when he was alive on cinema.
Boy, Bob, genius.
Oh, I don't know about that.
No, very well said. I mean, I was taken aback just by listening to you. I don't have something to come back with, but that's very, these films were happening when King was out making his great speeches and, doing his work. Amazing.
And I think we've got a clip from Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, don't we?
Why don't we, since it's 7 o'clock, this is Take Two, the movie program on public radio, KCBX, San Luis Obispo, and Santa Barbara counties. We have a great clip from Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. But speaking of which, let's go to the concession stand, refill our popcorns and our drinks, and we'll be back with Spencer Tracy in just a moment. We're back with our refreshments. We're all ready to go. It's Take Two, the movie program, and today, in honor of Martin Luther King Day, we're talking about race and racism in film. And we just talked about a great film, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. And if you're not familiar with the film, it is Sidney Poitier, who is getting ready to marry the daughter, the white daughter of Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn in the film. And here's the amazing Spencer Tracy. This is after the two sets of parents have gotten together. They've pretty much talked about how they're not real happy about the situation, uneasy at the very least. And what is amazing about this film too is there's interaction between the two dads and the two moms and the mom and the dad and the kids and everything. And it's everyone has a chance to talk things out. Well, after all this has happened, everyone's assembled in the living room, and here's a part of the great speech from Spencer Tracy from Guess Who's Coming to Dinner.
The minute I walked into this house this afternoon, Miss Bink said to me, well, all hell done broke loose now. I asked her naturally enough to what she referred, and she said, you'll see. And I did. Then after some preliminary guessing games, at which I was never very good, it was explained to me by my daughter that she intended to get married, and that her intended was a young man whom I had never met, who happened to be a Negro. Well, I think it's fair to say that I responded to this news in the same manner that any normal father would respond to it, unless, of course, his daughter happened to be a Negro, too. In a word, I was flabbergasted, and while I was still being flabbergasted, I was informed by my daughter, a very determined young woman, much like her mother, that the marriage was on, no matter what her mother and I might feel about it. Then the next rather startling development occurred, when you walked in and said that unless we, her mother and I, approved of the marriage, there would be no marriage.
You didn't. What a funny thing to do.
Joey, this may be the last chance I'll ever have to tell you to do anything. So I'm telling you, shut up. Now, it became clear that we had one single day in which to make up our minds as to how we felt about this whole situation. So what happened? My wife, typically enough, decided to simply ignore every practical aspect of the situation and was carried away in some kind of romantic haze which made her, in my view, totally inaccessible to anything in the way of reason. Now, I have not as yet referred to His Reverence, who began by forcing his way into the situation and then insulting my intelligence by mouthing 300 platitudes and ending just a half hour ago by coming to my room and challenging me to a wrestling match. What time is your plane?
10:45.
Right. Now, Mr. Prentice, clearly a most reasonable man, says he has no wish to offend me, but wants to know if I'm some kind of a nut. And Mrs. Prentice says that, like her husband, I'm a burnt-out old shell of a man who cannot even remember what it's like to love a woman the way her son loves my daughter. And strange as it seems, That's the first statement made to me all day with which I am prepared to take issue. Because I think you're wrong. You're as wrong as you can be. I admit that I hadn't considered it, hadn't even thought about it. But I know exactly how he feels about her. And there is nothing, absolutely nothing, that your son feels for my daughter that I didn't feel for Christina.
And Christina is Spencer Tracy's wife, Katharine Hepburn, and that the journey that he goes through as far as talking to all the members of the family is it comes down to love and respect. And it's interesting how Spencer Tracy says, well, I didn't think about that part of it, the fact that these two people are in love. And it's there's more to the speech than that. And if you enjoyed that clip, I highly recommend the film Guess Who's Coming to Dinner.
Absolutely. A classic. And sadly, Spencer Tracy, one of the giants of cinema, passed away just a few weeks after he made that speech.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I think that was the last scene shot for the film. And then he passed away 2 weeks afterwards of a heart attack. A giant. And what a fitting final epitaph to one of the screen's true legends.
Mm-hmm. And when you listen to Spencer Tracy in that clip, I mean, it's like things are maybe a little neat in the fact that Sidney Poitier is a handsome doctor, I believe, in the film. And there's some things that maybe the deck is a little bit stacked. But what's important about this film, just to capitalize on what I was saying earlier, they do talk these things out. Sidney Poitier's mother in the film talks about how utterly difficult this couple is going to have it if they get married. I mean, they don't shy away from it. They don't sugarcoat it a lot. They get into the brass tacks of what an interracial marriage will entail for these two.
There was a scene in that film between Tracy and Hepburn where they were liberal, and I think the film took place in San Francisco or the Bay Area, and how they had believed all these things all these years, and now because Sidney Poitier has shown up at their door in love with their daughter, they had to put these beliefs to the test, and it had gone from an abstraction to a reality.
Yes.
And that was fascinating. What a great little bit that was.
Yeah, that is great. Well, we're talking about race in film, and the program is Take Two, the movie program, and gonna next touch upon a film. I mean, again, there are so many films out there. You can weigh in with your films on the subject I'll give you the numbers. It's 549-8855 or 1-800-549-8855. Well, we're gonna go off the deep end here, but still, I think a very poignant film in addressing racism, and we'll just play you the theme.
He rode a blazing saddle, he wore a shining star. His job to offer battle to bad men near and far. He conquered fear and he conquered hate. He turned dark night into day. He made his blazing saddle a torch to light the way.
Well, we're talking about race, and Mel Brooks, I think the genius, not only the hilarity of Blazing Saddles, but I think he hit the race thing on the head squarely, and he did it in a way, unlike these other films we're talking about tonight, like To Kill a Mockingbird or In the Heat of the Night, just depicting the Old West in their probably what would be their natural racist state is throughout this film, and it makes such a statement to me, although it's so funny. And Richard Pryor was one of the screenwriters, and I think he lent his sensibility to this to this film that you just to call it a comedy, I think, is shortchanging it.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Mel Brooks, genius.
Yeah,
and whatever happened to Cleavon Little? We're still wondering about that.
What a great sheriff.
I hope, I hope he didn't go into the same obscura as, say, Fred the Hammer Williamson.
What happened to him?
Oh, the Hammer. Well, I don't know. I'm wondering. I was just thinking about Fred the Hammer Williamson. He was like a star of a lot of blaxploitation films. Former NFL star with the Kansas City Chiefs. Played in the first Super Bowl. Became a movie star like Jim Brown.
Oh.
And I just, for some reason, I was thinking about him. I don't know why. Jet lag.
Well, I think just as a brief overview is the idea that there are these great films like To Kill a Mockingbird, some of the things that you mentioned also, Bob, but you can also treat these things with humor. I mean, even the Spencer Tracy speech, and throughout Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, there's lots of humor in there to address perhaps an issue that's uncomfortable. You're talking about it, but there is an uneasy tension about it. And then, of course, Mel Brooks pulling out all the stops and Blazing Saddles. Let's go to the phones. If you could give us your name and where you're calling from. And good evening. You're on Take Two.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Hey, Bob, welcome back.
Why, thank you.
My name's Pete. I'm from Arroyo Grande. And
Hi, Pete.
And we've missed you. Glad to have you back. On the race and film issue, I saw one recently that was very provocative, and perhaps you guys would have more insight on it. The film Superfly.
Oh, right.
It was. Go.
No, you go. Go ahead.
No, it was a perspective that we just almost never get. It was entirely black perspective.
Yeah, that, of the blaxploitation cinema of the 70s, that came after the films we're talking about. These films we talked about tonight kind of blazed the trail.
Right.
And then you had your blaxploitation cinema, which, kind of gritty, urban, and your hero is black. And in this case, Superfly, interesting film. It's from about 1973, maybe. Stars Ron O'Neal, and he's a drug dealer, but he's the protagonist in the film. I mean, the 70s, things changed quite a bit, and with the decay of the inner cities, suddenly it was almost like, I don't know, for want of a better term, the inner cities were kind of like a Wild West zone. And, instead of, horses, they're driving around in Cadillacs, and, instead of gold, there's drugs, and there's only limited hope to how far you can get, and everybody's living in the moment. Shaft is another example, which recently was remade, not too well, because Richard Roundtree was super. But Superfly it's a film of its time. It's really different, interesting.
It was really beautiful. I mean, the editing, the direction, it was brilliant.
I believe it was done by Gordon Parks, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong, but it was filmed. It was produced by a black man, directed by a black man, written by a black man, starring a black man with an all-black cast. It was really unique in that way. Very special film, Superfly. Superfly TNT, the sequel, not so good.
Right. Well, thank you.
Well, thanks for calling.
Thanks for the call.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good evening. You're on Take Two. Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
This is Nancy from San Luis.
Hi, Nancy.
I'm calling because I want you to, of course, mention and talk about Showboat from back in the 50s.
Oh.
And Showboat was that film that I saw as a very young girl living back in the Midwest. And the entire theme of the program of the show is that Ava Gardner is part black and part white, but she appears as white, and so she cannot be in the Showboat theater because she is of the wrong race.
Yeah.
And the theme is all around trying to find out who she really is. And then, of course, there's the wonderful song that's sung by the black man, Old Man River, that really tells of the toil of the black people.
Yes.
And at the very end of the scene, very end of the movie, Ava Gardner is left standing on a dock as the boat goes on its tour on down the river. And as a young child living in the Midwest in an all-white area, it had a profound effect on me that I realized there was inequality, and I couldn't understand why she couldn't stay on the boat.
Wow. Yeah, the last time I saw a Showboat was on the stage in Santa Barbara, but again, race issues are at the core of this musical.
Yes, and the movie really is much better in many respects than the stage.
As
program.
I recall, I think Dorothy Dandridge was originally cast in that film, but
and Howard Keel is in this, who has a wonderful voice, and
Yeah.
Katherine Grayson is in this movie.
right, we met Howard Keel at the film festival a year or two ago. What a gent, a real gem of a man.
But this movie was really I believe, one of the forefronts.
And actually, I think there was a version of that done in the 30s, directed by James Whale, who did Frankenstein. I haven't seen that, and I'd be very curious to see what connection that one, I think it was from 1937, to the 1951 version that you brought up.
Uh-huh.
It's fabulous that you brought this up, because in the context of a musical, not that musicals don't get into interesting issues, so, shall we say, like West Side Story, and there's race issues going on in West Side Story, but Showboat, perfect for tonight's program.
Very, very dramatic show with music in it.
Yes.
And I was a child of 9, and it had a major effect on me.
Wow. Boy, those are the great movies that have
Yeah.
the major effect.
Thanks, guys. We love your program.
Oh, thanks for calling.
Okay, bye.
Good night. Good evening. You're on Take Two.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hi, guys. This is Jim in Arroyo Grande.
Hi, Jim.
Welcome back, Bob.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy your show, as always. Cleavon Little died.
He did?
He did.
Oh.
Yes, that's why you probably haven't heard anything about him recently. And I can't remember what the cause of death was, but at a relatively young age, I think.
Wow.
I remember seeing him on All in the Family briefly. I mean, he was messing with Archie Bunker, but that was about the only other thing. Maybe one or two other films. But
The one with the guy in the hot rod Mopar, remember, driving? I mean, he played a blind radio station operator who was giving...
Oh, Vanishing Point.
Vanishing Point, yes.
Right.
Oh.
He was the radio.
So that was a few years before Blazing Saddles.
Yes, it
So
was.
yeah, he must have died young. That's too bad.
Yeah.
It sure is. He was on a TV show there about a hospital show, kind of a comedy, way up before his movie career days, I think. Excuse me. Anyway, I was looking at a list of films that I made up dealing with racism that with racial groups other than African Americans. And I saw a clip last night. It's a D.W. Griffith film made in 1919 called Broken Blossoms with Lillian Gish and Donald Crisp, where there's a Chinese fellow who Lillian Gish gets involved with, and Donald Crisp plays the father, and it ends in tragedy with Donald Crisp killing Lillian Gish over this interracial relationship.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was a very early 1919 film dealing with racism in its own little way.
And you know, we were talking before the program, of course, in honor of the holiday, we've talked about black issues, but there are other types of racism that you see on the big screen, and the one you've heard about probably all the time is the villain depicted as a Middle Eastern person seems to be a rampant stereotype.
Yes, which is kind of topical for the day.
Yes, yes.
Also, Bad Day at Black Rock, 1955.
Right, that's a film that dealt with racism as well.
Japanese-American racism. And in that film, you never actually see the individual that the racism is directed at, because the person is dead by the time the character that's being dealt with, that Spencer Tracy comes to visit, is not in the picture anymore by that time.
And he ends up with one arm mowing down Robert Ryan, Ernest Borgnine, and Lee Marvin. That's pretty impressive.
It was, yeah. It was,
especially where he beats the crap out of Borgnine at one time.
Bar.
Wow.
Yeah, Borgnine was very unbelievable in that film. And he plays a good heavy.
He sure did.
Yeah.
What a great actor he
Yes,
is.
He was. And Milagro Beanfield, where I'll just kind of throw that out there too, a little bit racism being dealt with there in the Mexican American community, in that Robert Redford produced.
Oh, the Milagro Beanfield War.
Yeah.
Great.
Anyway, just some thoughts.
Oh, I appreciate your call.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jim.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Hi, good evening. You're on Take Two.
Is that me?
That's you.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to tell when you're listening. Charlie from Lompoc.
Hi, Charlie.
Yeah. In the Blackboard Jungle, Sal Mineo made his first appearance there, as I recall.
Was that his first film, Bob?
I think.
I don't
Or he
think
made
so.
an appearance. He was during the opening credits when they. That's where Bill Haley's "Rock Around the Clock" really was. They were dancing to "Rock Around the Clock." I think Sal Mineo was dancing. And I believe Sal Mineo was in that. Yeah, it was. I don't know if it was first, but it was a very early one of him.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Anyway, the other in terms of race issues, the movie wasn't contemporaneous with Martin Luther King, but the action was Driving Miss Daisy.
Yes, I've never even seen Driving Miss Daisy.
That brings an entirely different dimension, because the Miss Daisy was a rich Jewish family in the South, and the Jewish people in the South were actually in some ways in a more awkward position than the blacks, because the blacks had a defined role. I'm sorry, African Americans or whatever had a defined role in place, but the Jews were distrusted, and this was a rich Jewish businessman, and his mother was getting older and a little dotty, and she kept driving. She just, they had people that were, chauffeurs and people that were helping kind of live in care for her, and she just drove everybody up the wall in the this nice, very calm black chauffeur,
played by Morgan Freeman.
Yeah,
a real class act.
And that brought I've seen it both as a stage play and as a movie. And of course, in the movie, you see the Martin Luther King. Well, apparently. The Miss Daisy, I think, goes in to watch to actually hear him, and he's kind of left out in the car listening to it on the radio. And I didn't really think you'd be interested in that afterwards. It had some very interesting themes in that.
Great. So, Driving Miss Daisy.
I really heartily recommend it.
Great.
Another one that I think was better known that kind of
Charlie, we've got a bunch of calls.
Catch you later. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Don't forget Forrest Gump.
Oh.
That has some racial. It deals with racial, and among other things.
Great, Charlie.
Okay. Yeah. Later. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening. You're on Take Two.
Yeah. Hi. This is Ryan from San Luis Obispo.
Howdy.
Hiya.
Hey. Well, most of the movies that I've been hearing people mentioning are, they're American films, but they're about America. But, racism obviously is something that affects the globe, right?
Right.
So I was thinking of a couple of movies, but the first one I was thinking of was The Harder They Come, starring Jimmy Cliff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
Great film.
Yeah, because, it's just about like a street tough in Jamaica, and, he's a criminal, but he's a criminal because he can't find any work. He tries to make it as a musician, but the music industry is corrupt, and they take advantage, of the musicians. And
pay him a few bucks for the song, and they make a whole bunch of money, and he's on the street. But that's such a great film.
Yeah. It's great too because the whole thing's kind of in like the Jamaican patois or whatever, kind of a slang that they have. So
yes.
I had to read the subtitles the whole time.
Yeah. The Harder They Come.
Harder They Come.
From 1973.
And then the other one I was thinking of was Gandhi.
Oh.
If there's anyone as comparable as Martin Luther King, it would be Gandhi, and
absolutely.
There was a great movie. I can't remember who starred in it.
Ben Kingsley.
Exactly, Ben Kingsley. That's right.
Well,
he did a beautiful job starring as Gandhi. It was amazing.
And that's an epic film.
It is.
Too.
It is.
There's another epic film. Same director, Richard Attenborough, did Cry Freedom, which was all about was it about Nelson Mandela, I believe.
That's right.
So,
it's interesting. I'm just thinking about this, Ryan. You've kind of touched me here. There's an epic film about Gandhi, but there hasn't really been an epic film done about Dr. King. I know there was a mini-series. I think Paul Winfield played him. It may have come out in the 70s or something, but the epic film about the life of Dr. King has still yet to be made.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, they've done Malcolm X, and I mean, they've even done Ali already, and he was a great political figure too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you could say, like, you know, When We Were Kings was, and as well as Ali with Will Smith.
Oh, yeah.
Both kind of, you know.
In fact, there's a documentary from 1970, I think, called Muhammad Ali, and it deals with the period, Ryan, where he was stripped of his title because he refused to fight in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And he was touring the college campuses and reaching out to young white America, and that's when he really started becoming a legend. I mean, we all grew to love him then, or a lot of us did.
Yeah, When We Were Kings. I love that film.
Great film.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for calling.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
All right, bye.
We have a few more minutes for some calls. Good evening. You're on Take Two.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, this is Rebecca from San Luis.
Hi, Rebecca.
I'm remembering a movie that I think came out prior to 1968. I think it was a Sidney Poitier movie, and it was A Patch of Blue.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And as I recall, it was about a white blind woman, and he was her caregiver, perhaps. And or maybe he was her teacher. I'm not sure in what capacity he was with her, but it seems to me she began falling in love with him.
Yes.
And he knew that was verboten, or was a no-no.
And there was Shelley Winters in the wings to remind him it was verboten.
Now, I don't remember who the blind woman was.
Oh, she was played by a wonderful actress called Elizabeth Hartman. She was also in The Beguiled with Clint Eastwood.
Oh, yeah.
And a few other films. Unfortunately, tragically for her, she suffered from mental illness that was so severe, I believe she committed suicide in the early 70s. I mean, it's a sad story because she was a wonderful actress. And that's a tragic end to
Yes,
her.
I remember that movie had quite an impact on me. I don't think I was maybe in my early teens at the time and living in a real small town.
Boy.
It's a great film. I think it came out in 1964, possibly. Yeah.
Oh, that
great.
could be. I'm pretty sure it was before 68.
Yes, I agree.
But I just wanted to share my thoughts. And
Oh, well,
hear
thank
what you. Had to say.
That's what we're here for.
Well, thank you. I love your show.
Oh, thanks for calling, Rebecca.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Well, Bob, fantastic callers, and I think we had an appropriate subject for tonight's program, Martin Luther King Day and racism and race issues in film.
Absolutely. Great calls. You know, I was thinking about Superfly again. You know what was interesting about that film that I didn't quite touch on with the caller was, you know, this is 5 years after Dr. King has been assassinated. The inner cities are all decaying. Hope is going out. It's just gone out the window for the community of the inner cities. So they had to turn to, you know, lawlessness in order to survive. And the film probably wouldn't play as well in in today's more moralistic context. But still, Superfly, 1973, Ron O'Neal, a great film.
Well, thanks to all the listeners. Thanks for all the calls. Thanks to Gary for running the radio projector in the projection room here at KCBX, and also to Martin for manning the phone calls. And great to have you back, Bob.
Gosh, it's good to be back, Jim, and thanks to everybody for all your kind thoughts over the last month or so. It's been kind of trying for me, but I'm back, and I'm really excited to be talking movies with everybody again.
And me too. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll be back again next Monday at 6:30 with more of Take Two.